Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I spent the entire afternoon planning the surprise. As I drove along the winding roads leading to the downtown bistro where Corinne's company party was taking place, a quiet smile lingered at the corner of my mouth. We had been married for 8 years, and even after all this time, I still loved the small gestures, the little cinematic moments, like showing up unannounced just to let her know she was on my mind. Corinne had said it would just be a casual dinner with colleagues, something informal, no guests. That was the perfect cover. I decided not to tell her I was coming. I wanted to see her face light up, that specific way her eyes would widen just before she broke into a genuine, unreserved smile. I imagined a tight hug, maybe a surprised and slightly flustered kiss, and her coworkers laughing at the sweet, unexpected interruption. But what awaited me was a kind of surprise I would never forget, the kind that splinters a life into a before and an after. As soon as I parked, I walked into the main hall of the bistro. The place was buzzing with conversations, the clinking of glasses, and waves of laughter. It was warm and inviting. I recognized a few faces from Corinne's workplace from the photos she often showed me, framed on our mantelpiece. I scanned the crowded tables, looking for her familiar auburn hair, but I couldn't see her. I figured she was probably in the restroom or had stepped outside to take a call. No matter. I had time. I decided to walk around, take a quick look. I passed through the outside patio area, a cozy space with fairy lights strung between trellises. I crossed the side of the building, making my way toward the back parking lot, thinking maybe she'd gone out for a breath of fresh air. That's when I stopped. A few feet away, leaning against the side of the very car she herself had driven there, was Corinne. She was with another man. He was clean-shaven, well-dressed in a tailored suit, and had an air of easy self-confidence in the way he held her by the waist. His hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture of intimate familiarity. They were kissing. It wasn't a quick, stolen peck. They were kissing slowly, without rush, as if they were completely comfortable in that secluded space, lost in their own world. For a moment, a surreal, fleeting moment, I thought my mind was making it up, distorting some innocent scene into a nightmare. My brain scrambled for an alternative explanation. A trick of the light? A bizarre misunderstanding? But it wasn't. It was real. The woman I loved, the woman who shared my life, my bed, my dreams, was kissing another man. Right there in the parking lot, while I stood holding the expectation of a romantic surprise in my chest, time seemed to freeze. The ambient noise of the party faded into a dull roar. The cool night air felt thick, unbreathable. I was a statue, rooted to the spot, watching the foundation of my world crumble into dust. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A nauseating churn started in the pit of my stomach. There was no immediate, hot surge of anger, just a profound state of shock, a foolish, desperate attempt by my mind to reject what my eyes were seeing. When I finally regained control over my limbs, I started to approach, my steps firm on the cracked asphalt. The man, Landon I would later learn his name was, noticed me first. His eyes flickered over Corinne's shoulder and met mine. He immediately released her and took a half step back, his confident posture dissolving into awkwardness. She turned her face, following his gaze, and upon seeing me, her skin went instantly pale. She looked like a ghost. The shock in her eyes said everything. She knew the weight of that moment, the irreparable damage of it. "Elias, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a shaky whisper, as if she was still trying to find an explanation that could somehow undo the last 30 seconds. I took a deep breath, keeping my eyes locked on hers, the only anchor in a dizzying sea of betrayal. "I think the right question is, what are you doing here?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her breathing became shallow and quick, her hands trembling by her sides. The other man, visibly uncomfortable and wanting no part of the confrontation that was forming, muttered a barely audible, "I should go," and quickly left the scene, disappearing around the corner of the building. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or scream. I simply looked at Corinne for a few more seconds, letting the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, I turned around and walked away. "Elias, wait," she called out, running after me. "Please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like." Her words were scattered, nonsensical pleas that didn't register. Please, tears, but I kept walking until I reached my car and got in. My eyes burned, not with tears, but with the searing image now permanently etched into my memory. My chest felt compressed from the inside, as if a great weight was crushing my lungs. Starting the car was an automatic gesture, my body moving on autopilot while my mind was in freefall. The ride back home was made in the cruelest silence of my life. It was more than just betrayal. It felt like a fundamental breaking of reality. It was as if everything I had lived until that moment had been a lie, now unraveling into pieces before my very eyes. In my memory came flashes of the last few months, her being more distant, the vague messages on her phone, explained away with ready-made excuses about work stress. Laughs that once seemed common, now seemed suspicious. Everything suddenly, horribly, made sense. And what hurt most was realizing that while I was meticulously planning a small gesture of love, she had chosen that exact moment to live a secret life, away from me, with another man. When I got home, I went straight to the living room and sat on the couch, staring into the darkness. A little later, Corinne arrived. Her face was red, her eyes swollen with a mixture of desperation and guilt. She begged for a chance to talk, to explain. I finally looked at her. She was the woman I loved, but something inside me had already irrevocably changed. The trust, so carefully built over nearly a decade, had been destroyed in a matter of minutes. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was tearing me apart inside. Corinne squeezed her eyes shut, as if that could avoid the impact of the question. The tears returned, but I remained silent, waiting. After a few seconds, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. 2 months. It felt like something inside me tore. It wasn't just the number. It was the thought of everything we had gone through in those 2 months while she was feeding a lie. The dinners, the conversations, the nights we'd made love. All of it was tainted. "Did you sleep with him?" The question came out like a sharp knife, cutting through the thick air between us. She hesitated. Then she lowered her head and nodded shamefully. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. I didn't say anything else. I got up, went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a suitcase. I packed some clothes, toiletries, my laptop, all in a quiet, methodical daze. Corinne stood in the hallway, watching everything, too weak or too ashamed to stop me. "I'm going to Marin's for a few days," I said, zipping the suitcase shut. "I need to think." She pleaded with me not to go, said we could talk, seek help, therapy, whatever was necessary. But at that moment, I didn't have space for anything beyond the crushing weight I carried inside. I grabbed the suitcase, my wallet, and my keys, and walked out the door, leaving behind the ruins of our life together. At my sister Marin's house, I found shelter, but not peace. The guest room was quiet, the bed comfortable, but sleep offered no escape. The image of the kiss in the parking lot replayed in my mind on a relentless loop. Marin tried to talk, to offer comfort, but I avoided the subject. I just said I needed time, a phrase that felt both true and completely inadequate. I spent hours staring at the ceiling or sitting on her porch, watching the world go on as if mine hadn't just imploded. My phone vibrated constantly. I knew it was Corinne. The messages accumulated, a digital testament to her desperation. They were long, rambling paragraphs, short, staccato apologies, and voice notes thick with the sound of her crying. Some just said the word sorry, over and over again. I read some, ignored others. I didn't reply to any of them. One of those nights, Marin placed a cup of tea on the coffee table beside me. "Do you still love her?" she asked gently. I took a long time to respond. "Yes," I finally said, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. "But maybe it's not enough anymore. Loving someone who lied to you every day for 2 months. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. Eventually, it all just slips away." And that was exactly what I felt. Everything was slipping through my fingers. After a week of suffocating silence, I made a decision. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could decide what came next. I called a lawyer and scheduled a meeting. The word divorce felt foreign and brutal, but it also felt like the only path forward. When Corinne was served with the papers, her desperation morphed into something else, something more frantic. The pleading text turned into demands to talk. She insisted it was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment that didn't mean anything. But 2 months wasn't a moment. It was a choice, made day after day. A few weeks later, she crossed a line she could never uncross. I had returned to the house to pick up more of my things. As I was packing a box of books, she showed up, unannounced. She was carrying a grocery bag filled with ingredients from my favorite meal: steak, asparagus, the expensive bottle of wine I liked. "I thought I could cook for you," she said, a hopeful, broken smile on her face. "Like we used to." The gesture was so transparent, such a desperate attempt to rewind time, that it didn't even make me sad. It just made me tired. "Corinne, you can't be here," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "It's over." "No, it's not over until you say it's over," she cried, her voice rising. "We can fix this, Elias. I know we can." "I don't trust you anymore," I said, and the simple truth of that statement hung in the air between us. And without trust, any gesture just feels like manipulation. She left crying, leaving the grocery bag on the porch like a sad offering. I didn't touch it. I closed the door, walked back to my box of books, and later, I gave the entire bag of food to my neighbor. It was a small act, but it felt symbolic. I was done consuming the lies she was trying to feed me. Weeks turned into months. The divorce process ground forward with the slow, impersonal mechanics of the legal system. I moved into a small apartment of my own, a sterile, empty space that I slowly began to fill with my life, the half that was left. Anyway, the pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it no longer consumed every waking thought. It was during this fragile period of rebuilding that I met Thea. A mutual friend had dragged me out to a local art fair, insisting I needed to get out of the house. Thea was there, displaying some of her students' work. She was a high school history teacher. She had a calm, steady presence, and a laugh that was warm and genuine. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, didn't force a proximity I wasn't ready for. And that, more than anything, was why I felt comfortable. Our beginning was slow, without rush. A coffee, then another. Some longer conversations that stretched late into the evening. Slowly, I realized I was smiling again without feeling a pang of guilt. I was looking forward to seeing someone again. Thea was like a quiet sunrise after a long, dark night. Then, the past came roaring back. Our mutual friend posted a photo on social media from a small street festival we'd all gone to. It was a simple, candid shot. I was standing beside Thea, a genuine smile on my face as I listened to a local band. It was an image of simple happiness, but for Corinne, it was enough to light a fuse. 3 days later, Thea received a visit at her school. She called me that night, her voice strained. "Elias, we need to talk." She told me how a woman had come to the school during her prep period, introducing herself as Elias's wife. It was Corinne. Corinne had told Thea a completely distorted version of the facts. She claimed we were still married, just going through a rough patch, and that I was emotionally unstable and confused. She painted herself as the loyal wife, patiently waiting for her troubled husband to come to his senses, and painted Thea as a predatory opportunist. "She said you were vulnerable and that I was taking advantage of you," Thea recounted, her voice a mix of disbelief and hurt. "She asked me to do the right thing and step away to give our marriage a chance to heal." My blood ran cold. This was no longer about a broken heart. This was calculated, malicious interference. This was an attack not just on me, but on an innocent person who had nothing to do with my failed marriage. That night, I drove to Thea's apartment. I didn't want any doubt to linger in her mind. I brought the divorce papers with me, the ones that were nearly finalized. I spread them out on her coffee table and told her everything, from the beginning. The kiss in the parking lot, the confession, the separation, the constant messages. I laid my broken past bare for her to see. She was silent for several minutes after I finished, just digesting everything. I braced myself for her to say it was too much, too complicated. Instead, she reached out and took my hand. "I'm so sorry you went through that," she said softly. "And I'm relieved to hear the truth. But Elias, I'm also scared of what she's capable of." Thea's fear was a sobering reality check. I had been trying to handle Corinne's behavior by creating distance, hoping she would eventually give up and move on. But her visit to Thea's school proved that my passive approach wasn't working. It was escalating. "We should file a formal complaint," Thea suggested, her tone practical and firm. What she did was harassment. I hesitated. A part of me still recoiled at the idea of involving the authorities. It felt like such an ugly, drastic step. The man who had once planned surprise parties for this woman was now considering filing a police report against her. "Maybe it's just a phase," I said, weakly. "Maybe with time, it'll pass." She crossed a line. "Elias," Thea insisted gently but firmly. "If she crossed this one, she might cross others. We need to protect what we're starting to build, and you need to protect your peace." She was right. The next day, the two of us went to the police station. The building felt cold and impersonal. I explained the situation to an officer, feeling a deep sense of shame as I recounted Corinne's actions. It felt like I was airing my life's most painful failure under fluorescent lights. The officer listened patiently and suggested we request a protective order. I hesitated again, but a look from Thea solidified my resolve. I agreed. A week later, the restraining order was granted. Corinne was officially notified to stay away, with no physical or virtual contact allowed. For a few weeks, it seemed to work. The messages stopped. There were no unexpected appearances. Thea returned to teaching with more tranquility, and I started to feel like I could finally breathe again. But the peace was brief. One afternoon, Thea left work and found the rearview mirror on the passenger side of her car smashed. The glass lay shattered on the pavement. There were no security cameras in that section of the parking lot, no witnesses. But there was a single, fresh gardenia resting on her windshield, the same type of flower Corinne used to love to wear in her hair. The tension returned with a vengeance. That flower was a message. It was a clear, aggressive reminder that she was still there, watching, even when the law said she couldn't be. I began to feel pursued, a constant, low-grade anxiety humming beneath the surface of my days. I started checking the door twice before leaving my apartment. I scanned parking lots. I avoided posting anything on social media. Living under that constant tension was exhausting. A few days later, Thea received a message on her cell phone from an unknown number. The text was short and chilling. "Be careful. He's still my husband. This hasn't ended." We went back to the police station, the text message and a photo of the broken mirror and the flower as new evidence. The officer, now more attentive to the recurrence of these incidents, took it seriously. The restraining order was already in effect, but this was a clear violation. He documented it, and the report was forwarded to the local prosecutor's office. We hoped that would be the end of it. We were wrong. A week later, what we feared most happened. Corinne showed up in front of Thea's school right as the final bell rang. She stood there on the public sidewalk, arms crossed, watching the students pour out of the building. She approached two of Thea's coworkers and asked where she was, saying she needed to resolve a personal matter. One of the coworkers, sensing something was wrong, discreetly went back inside and informed Thea, who hid in the faculty lounge and called me, her voice trembling with panic. I dropped everything at work and raced over. When I arrived, I saw her Corinne, still standing there, defiant. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. She tried to resist when the police arrived, putting on a performance of the confused, heartbroken wife. "I just wanted to talk to him," she cried. "I love my husband. I never meant to hurt anyone." The speech didn't move the officers. There was already a history. There was evidence. And there was a clear, blatant violation of a court order. They put her in handcuffs and led her to the patrol car. As they drove away, I looked over at the school entrance, where Thea was now standing, pale and shaken. The relief I felt was overshadowed by a sickening dread. This was far from over. Corinne's family bailed her out within hours. The news hit me like a physical blow. The brief respite we felt seeing her arrested had evaporated, replaced by an even more potent fear. What would she do now that she was angry and facing legal consequences? We didn't have to wait long to find out. As soon as she was released, she went straight to my apartment. I was sitting with Thea, trying to reassure her, when the banging started. It wasn't a knock. It was a frantic, furious pounding on the door that echoed through the small apartment. "Elias, I know you're in there. Open this door." Corinne's voice was shrill, hysterical. "We need to talk. You can't do this to me. We have a history. You can't just throw everything away like this." Thea and I sat frozen on the couch. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. My sanctuary had become a prison. The neighbor across the hall, a middle-aged woman I'd only ever exchanged pleasantries with, recorded the whole thing on her phone through her peephole and called the police again. When the sirens wailed in the distance, Corinne tried to run. The officers caught her at the end of the hallway. She was contained and arrested again, this time for violating the restraining order less than 12 hours after being released. This time, however, the system worked differently. The judge who reviewed the case considered the immediate relapse a serious threat. Bail was denied. She would be kept in custody until her final hearing, which could take weeks or even months. I was shocked to learn she had come directly to my house. The last shred of hope I had that she might still possess some good sense was gone. Her love hadn't just turned into obsession, it had become dangerous, a suffocating force that threatened to consume everything in its path. Thea, despite her fear, tried to stay calm, but it was clear that staying here was becoming untenable. The authorities were doing their job, but we were living in a constant state of high alert. We couldn't live with any peace of mind. We avoided going out together in public. We checked the surroundings before parking our cars. Simple daily habits had become exercises in vigilance. We were exhausted. That's when I proposed something I had been maturing in silence. An idea born of desperation. "Let's move," I said to Thea one evening, the words feeling heavy and momentous. "Let's go to another city. Start over somewhere else. Away from the memories, away from this constant tension." The idea didn't please her at first. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She had roots here, her students, her colleagues, a life she had built for herself. Leaving it all behind for my problems felt like an unfair burden to place on her. But after Corinne's second arrest, she realized this wasn't just the bad ending of my relationship. It was a situation that was actively putting our freedom and our peace at risk. I contacted a childhood friend who lived in Asheville, North Carolina. He worked at a local engineering firm and mentioned they had a job opening. The salary was good, the cost of living was lower, but it was the possibility of living without fear that weighed most heavily on the scale. The decision was made with a mixture of relief and pain. Leaving the city where I grew up, where I had built and lost a life, felt like a silent mourning. We packed up the house in less than a week. It was a whirlwind of boxes and goodbyes. I informed the local police of our move, gave the new information to my lawyer, and left a copy of the case file with my friendly neighbor, just in case. The idea was to cut all possible ties with the past. Thea transferred her teaching credentials to the new school district and resigned in person, without giving many details. As we drove out of the city limits, I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Corinne's car following us. But there was nothing, just the open road, and the hope of a new, quieter life ahead. When we arrived in Asheville, the air seemed different. It was crisp and clean, tinged with the scent of pine from the surrounding mountain. There was still a lingering uncertainty, but the feeling of freedom, of a clean slate, slowly began to fill the empty spaces in our lives. We started to build a new routine, one where the past no longer commanded every thought. We began sleeping through the night without having to triple-check the locks on the doors. We went out to dinner, we walked in the central plaza, we talked about future plans with an ease that had been impossible before. The feeling of renewal wasn't just an idea, it was a daily practice, built step by step, day by day. I started the new job with a renewed sense of purpose. Thea quickly found a position at a local high school and fell in love with her new students and their stories. We were no longer just surviving, we were living. The memory of Corinne still appeared in conversations sometimes, but it no longer dominated them. It was becoming a scar, a visible reminder of a past wound, but one that had finally healed over. The news of Corinne's sentence came through my lawyer in a sterile, formal email. She would remain detained indefinitely, pending a complete psychiatric evaluation and further judicial deliberation. The defense couldn't reverse the extensive history of violations, nor convince the judge that she presented no risk to others. I read the email and left my phone on the table, as if that was the final point I had been waiting for all these months. I didn't feel satisfaction or triumph, only a profound, bone-deep relief. The obsession that had consumed the woman I once loved was now being treated as a clinical case, which perhaps it should have been from the beginning. A few weeks later, during a small dinner party with friends we had made in the new city, Thea showed me a drawing left on her desk at school. One of her students had depicted the two of us smiling, holding hands under a cartoonishly bright Sunday. We both laughed. It was a small piece of innocence amid so many marks left by the past. That night, sitting side by side on our new couch, Thea asked if I ever regretted trying to save the marriage when everything first started to fall apart. I thought about it for a moment. No, I answered honestly, I don't regret it. Loving someone, even when it hurts, is still part of the experience of living truthfully. What I no longer tolerate, I added, looking at her, is allowing someone else's pain and choices to dictate my life. I've overcome that. Time passed, and life finally found a stable, happy rhythm. Then came another surprise, but this time, it was the kind I had once dreamed of. Thea was pregnant. The news caught us both off guard, but it was received with overwhelming emotion. When I saw the positive test, I went into the bathroom and cried silently. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was the weight of everything we had been through, finally transformed into something new, alive, and pure. We redecorated the spare room, painting it a soft yellow. We began planning for a future that was no longer about escaping a past, but about building a family. With each ultrasound, the connection between us grew stronger, a bond forged not in idyllic romance, but in the trenches of a shared struggle, built with patience, honesty, and unwavering care. On the day of the birth, I held my daughter in my arms for the first time. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and in that moment, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. It was as if everything I had suffered, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the fear, the crushing feeling of defeat, had all led me here, to this perfect, peaceful moment. There was no more room for grudges or bitterness. Allison, with all the damage she had caused, was now just a chapter in a book that was long since closed. What remained was the certainty that moving forward, even when every part of you hurts, is still the most courageous path a person can choose. And I had chosen, firmly, with dignity, and with love.